All right. Greetings and welcome to the fourth episode of the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. My name is Kerry Miller. It's my good friend Graham Doeren. Before we get into the basketball, how about them Chiefs? All right, we won't bore you with football. We're going to start out with some trivia, though. We're going to do one seeds, we'll do the bubble, and then we're going to go through one team from each conference that I feel like is the trickiest to seed right now. But I warned you the trivia was coming, but I didn't tell you what the question was. So, since net started, so in the 4 years that we've had tournament data, what is the worst resume metrics average to make the tournament? You can give me the team, you can give me the ranking. I'll give you a little bit to think about it, and I'll tell you why I'm going on those teams. Right now, Gonzaga is 80.5 in the resume metrics average. It's not that low. Michigan State is 70. Texas is 64. Colorado is 60. Obviously, these numbers can change from here, but a lot of people have some of these teams in, maybe even all four of those teams in, and based on the historical data, they should not be in. That's enough time. What do you got?
2022 Rutgers.
Yes.
And is it 54.5?
57.5.
I knew it was one of those
What is
0.5.
wrong
I
with
just
you?
couldn't remember the exact number.
So 57.5 average. So that's the KPI SOR average, and that was the worst. And that was a team that had 5 quad 1A wins. They had 4 consecutive wins over AP. Not that the AP poll matters for bracketology, but 4 straight wins over ranked teams. Great season. I know they had 13 losses, but still a resume average. Where are you on resume rankings right now? Because last show we talked about what's our most important metric. What do we look at the most right now? Where are you looking right now?
I'm starting to kind of progressively start eliminating some of those resume metric averages that are really high.
Yeah.
I think it's just, literally day by day, it's just coming down a little bit. So now I'm really only looking at top 60 in resume average. If you haven't gotten to that point, I just don't think you've done enough at this point of the season, especially now that we're a few games into conference play in every conference in the country. You've had the chance to get a quality win or two. So I think it's coming down, but it will continue to go down because I think we're going to get to that point where it's going to get closer to that. If you're not 56, 57, it's really not worth a look because, again, that's the average. So that means one of the two metrics for resume is really, really bad if it's even as high as a 57.5. So I think what we're going to see is if you are in a situation like that, you're probably having one of those metrics is actually looking pretty good, and it's the other one's looking really bad. Just because, I guess another way to put it is, maybe you could have a really nice strength of record like Notre Dame and miss out on your quality win opportunities in 2022. And then the team they played, Rutgers.
Talking about Notre Dame right now.
But the team they played, Rutgers, was actually like it was a contrast in profiles. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame did a good job of winning all the games they were supposed to win. They just couldn't beat the top teams on their schedule. Whereas Rutgers had a lot of really good wins. They had a lot of really bad losses too. So one of those metrics is usually going to look pretty good in tournament worthy, even if the other one isn't looking so much like that. So I think that's another thing I look for. It's not just who's a team that has a decent resume metric average. Does at least one of those look like they belong in the tournament?
Right. You still got to have the wins because North Carolina last year, I think they were 49 in resume metrics average. So it's not 57.5 isn't the magic. If you're above that, you get in. But if you're below that, it's really tough to get in. And I think at this point, if anyone's 60 or below on Selection Sunday, I'm probably not going to even consider them, really.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not really worth being considered. Maybe if you had like the craziest resume of all time, where somebody somehow has like 8 quadrant 1 wins, but they get to like 61 because they dropped, 6 games against Q3 and Q4 in the first month of the season or
Villanova.
something.
That's who we're going for now.
I mean, it would have to be genuinely like the craziest resume you've ever seen. So it's not even really worth thinking about.
So that was our trivia. Now we'll go into the 1 seeds. I'll let you go first. What's your one line right now? I'm pretty sure we're not going to be the same.
I think the unquestionable number 1 seed overall of the 1 seeds is Purdue.
It has to be, yes.
Then beyond there, I go to Kansas, actually.
Okay, we are close.
Because I really like those elite wins. Then I move down to UConn.
Oh, my goodness.
A team that they beat. And then
But I know we're different on the 4 because I saw you were
Houston
asking.
is my fourth
Okay.
overall. I think their efficiency is really great, but more than that, I actually think some of their wins just aged well over the weekend. I will get to that in just a second, where that may have changed a little bit. But Texas A&M picks up a big win against Kentucky.
Hmm.
Dayton went on the road, beat Duquesne.
Yep.
So I think some of those wins are actually starting to look a little bit better until Utah loses the same for today. So we'll have to see how that affects things
Yeah.
because nothing happens in a vacuum,
No.
right? Like even if Houston isn't playing today, their resume changed today because Utah is not quite as good of a win as it was earlier in the day.
What's funny is Houston's road win over Xavier, even though Xavier's 8-8, like you wouldn't think that's a good win. I can't delete them from my spreadsheet. They're like 43 in the net. They're around 38 average in the resume or the excuse me predictive metrics, 50 something resume. Like that's actually maybe Houston's best win was that true road win over Xavier, which is kind of crazy. I dropped Houston all the way to 7 overall on my seed list. I have Wisconsin above Houston right now. It's just quantity of quality wins. Houston's done nothing against quad 2, which usually you don't really discuss quad 2 when you're looking at the 1 seeds, but Wisconsin has 4 Q1 wins and 4 2Q wins. Houston has 4 Q1, nothing in Q2. So that's just kind of like a dividing factor for me. I still have Arizona as my 4th 1 seed. I know you were between North Carolina and Houston. I think just the overall quality of their wins. Both Arizona and North Carolina have 5 quad 1 wins right now. They each have 3 quad 1A wins right now. Arizona's 2 quad 1B wins are really close to quad 1A. Like their 5 best wins are so strong. I think second only to what Purdue has done. Granted, Arizona lost to Stanford. Arizona lost to Washington State. I know that happened. I think their resume is still strong enough. And this didn't factor into why I went that way, but it'd be good for the bracket if it was a West team that's number 1. Certainly if North Carolina, who is my 5 overall right now, if I'm North Carolina, I'd rather be the 2 in the East with UConn than the 1 out West with possibly Arizona and Los Angeles. I know that happened with, what was it, Wisconsin and Arizona back in like 2014, and it doesn't always play out that way, but looking ahead, that might actually be beneficial to North Carolina.
Yeah, I think I actually, I disagree with having Arizona there, but I certainly see the logic. I could see with their efficiency profile and the really, really good wins that they have on the resume, I could certainly see the committee going in that
Yeah.
direction. For me, I think the differentiator with Arizona compared to some of these other teams right now is simply just the quantity of losses.
Sure.
And it may only be 2 extra losses compared to, Kansas and UConn and Houston, but we're still relatively early in the season. 2
Yeah.
extra losses at this point of the year is not like 2 extra losses at the end of the
Right.
season. So for me, I think that is really kind of the only reason that I don't think Arizona's on the 1 line is just quantity of losses.
Yeah.
But it's not for efficiency or lack of quality
Yeah,
wins.
'cause I think
They look great there.
they're 2 in the net, 2 in the predictive metrics. So it's like I feel like Arizona and Houston, resume wise, are the same, just 2 more losses, exactly like you're saying. And I do think by year end, with the complete lack of quality wins they're going to be able to get in the Pac-12, they probably will drop off that 1 line. But if I had to see the field today, which is what we do for a living, I would have Arizona there. And it's very close. I mean, 2 through 7 entirely, I feel like there's very little separation right now. Like if the committee did a reveal right now and Kansas was 5 overall, even though we both have them at 2, would you really be that shocked? Like,
Not at all.
yeah, so it's tough dividing factor right now. So we're going to do 1 team from each conference that we're having the most trouble figuring out where to seed exactly right now. We'll go alphabetically through I'm going to call it the 7 major conferences, since the Mountain West is more of a major conference than half of the major conferences right now. But we'll start in the ACC. What do you got?
I think it has to be Clemson.
Yeah.
They have a great resume metric average, poor efficiency average. And I say that relatively, right? They actually have a very nice efficiency average.
Got it right here. They are 28 in net, 13.5 resume, 31 predictive. So compared to where we had them 2 weeks ago when they looked like a possible, maybe even a number 1 seed, now it's like, all right, how far do we drop them based on what they've been doing? So that's my team as well.
I mean, like
sure.
efficiency wise, they would still be like an 8 seed. If you were just basing this on efficiency, we're still talking an 8 seed. So I mean, relatively bad efficiency
Sure.
compared to their resume metrics. I think what makes them really difficult for me isn't necessarily the gap between the resume metrics and the efficiency metrics. It's more so that I don't really believe in their wins a whole lot. They won at Alabama. That win is looking so much better. But beyond that, I think it's kind of some decent wins, not necessarily great wins.
Yeah.
But again, they do have that one win that really stands out. I think at Alabama is a truly elite win. So that's what makes it difficult, I think, is when you have a team that has a truly elite win. They have very nice resume metrics, but there's also just not a whole lot else on the resume, and their efficiency metrics are questionable. So I don't necessarily know which way the committee would lean. I have them as a low 5 seed,
Okay.
kind of splitting that difference.
And I have them 15 overall, so a low 4 seed. So already we're making our point that we're not really sure where to put them. We're a full seed line apart on them, and I don't even disagree with you at all. To your point about the quality of their wins, 1-1 against Quad 1A, which is the Alabama win, 3-4 overall against Quad 1. No bad losses outside of that, which is why it feels like they should be up there, but it also kind of feels like they shouldn't. There's also the whole, all right, it's Clemson. Or do we really believe in Clemson for basketball? And at the end of the day, like the selection committee is going to have those conversations. So moving on to the Big 12. Who do you have there?
I think the Big 12, for me, it has to be Iowa State for the same reason, just that huge gap between resume metrics and efficiency average. And it's kind of actually very similar to Clemson in that Iowa State has one really good win. They beat Houston at home. After that, it's basically just Iowa as a decent win.
Yeah.
So if you look at the efficiency metrics, they're an elite basketball team. If you look at beating Houston, there's a reason to believe this is truly an elite basketball team that can get elite wins, but then there's actually nothing else on the resume at all. So I think they're a difficult team for me to seed. They're my best 6 seed, but I could see them being like a 10 or something like that.
I think I have them around the 9 line. I didn't write down where I have them, but before that Houston win, I had them out. I think you did as well, or at least like on the bubble. So that I agree. They're a tough tough nut to crack. For me, it's Cincinnati, who I have out right now. They're my first team out.
They're my first team out as well.
Okay, well, spoiler alert for later. 12-4 overall, had that one awesome win over BYU, and that is it. No other Quad 1 wins, no other Quad 2 wins, and 8 of their other 11 wins were Quad 4. So just they have one great win, and we're not even sure how great that win over BYU is. The net loves it. I actually don't know where BYU is at as of this morning, but they were number 2 in the net when that win happened. It's not going to drop from a Quad 1A win anytime soon, probably ever. So that's looking like one of the best wins you can get. Got to back it up though, right? Because I have Ohio State out right now too, and they have a really great win over Alabama, but nothing else beyond that. So we're at that point in the season where you need at least 2 decent wins to be considered for the field, in my opinion. Big East, I'm going to guess we're going to agree it's Villanova as the toughest.
We are not going to agree on this one.
Yeah. What do you got?
I think it's the Seton Hall Pirates, and for similar reasons that we've discussed.
Where do you have them? Let's start there.
I have them as an 8 seed.
I do too.
Okay, so maybe they're not as hard to seed as I thought they were.
I did struggle with them, but
well, they're really great in Quadrant 1. 4-2 against Quadrant 1. Yes. Some very nice victories within Quadrant 1. So, yeah, not every Quadrant 1 win is the same. Theirs are really nice. And I think, they've shown they can compete against anybody. But they also have a lot of losses for a team that's in the bracket, especially for a team in a single-digit seed position. So I think there's, efficiency is not so great. There's reasons to question them, especially long term.
Yeah.
But for me, their wins are just so good that I push them to as high as I can possibly push them as far as their metrics go. I just don't think you can really get to like a 6 seed or something like that because their metrics don't justify that. But I think the 8 seed is as high as I can move them.
So before Connecticut beat Georgetown today, Seton Hall was in sole possession of first place in the Big East, which is insane thinking of where they were just 3 weeks ago. Like their only half-decent win in non-conference play was a road game against Missouri in Kansas City. I think it was technically a neutral game. But then their first 6 games, right? 4 games on the road. The 2 home games were against Connecticut and Marquette. If you had to guess 6 games into Big East play, you'd think they were alone in last place in the Big East. But there they are, 5-1. I mean, speaking to what you were saying about the efficiency metrics, their last 4 wins over Providence, Marquette, Georgetown, and Butler were by a combined margin of 17 points. That's no way to help yourself on KenPom. But resume-wise, yeah, with the 4 quadrant 1 wins, they're there.
I mean, the other thing is, well, the way it's going, they might be a legitimate Big East contender at the end of the year, too. And if that's the case, the committee has to have them near the top of the bracket, because you can't have a Big East championship quality team not there. Like, I think we saw this with Miami last year, receiving a 5 seed. If you are a champion of a power conference, they're going to show that respect, maybe more so than their resume would otherwise indicate.
We've been saying for a couple of weeks that Memphis is 2021-22 Providence. Maybe Seton Hall is 2021-22 Providence, where they're just going to have such great wins. Their resume metrics are going to demand that they be up there, but they might end up 50th on KenPom. We'll all be like, all right, you deserve your 4 seed, but you're going to lose, right? With the predictive metrics say you're not that good. Yeah, I have Villanova as the toughest to seed Big East team. I have them at 20. I wrote down 28, but that was before Utah lost and then fell behind Villanova. So I have Villanova at 27 now, so a low 7 seed. 4-0 against Quad 1, 1-3 against Quad 3. That's such a stupid resume. They were so good in the battle for Atlantis, couldn't win at home in the whatever they're calling it now, the Philadelphia Big Six, that round robin tournament of sorts. But I don't know what to do with it. Every time I'm going through a bracket, I'm like, I get to around the 4 seed line, I'm like, can I put Villanova here yet? No. And then eventually I'm like, well, I got to put Villanova somewhere. And they usually end up around that 6-7 seed line. Big Ten, who's the toughest for you to seed or not seed? Your choice.
Seed, and it's a team that I think has to be in the bracket right now based on what they've done as far as really a nice couple of wins. You mentioned you need a nice couple wins at this point. Purdue and Michigan State were victories for the Northwestern Wildcats. So I think they have to be in, but I'm having a hard time justifying getting high with them into like the 8-9 range. So they've settled for an 11 seed for me, just because I don't see a whole lot else there outside of those wins. But I do think those wins are enough to at least justify inclusion in the field. But I mean, they're also owners of a victory over Purdue.
Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to have them as like an 8 seed, I can see that. I'm not getting there due to the lack of other wins, but I think that's what makes it difficult to seed them right now, is they do have multiple good wins, and one of them is against the overall number 1 seed of the tournament. So it kind of feels like an 11 seed's a little low.
Yeah, they're my bottom number 10 seed. I had them as my top 11 until I was going through and realized I forgot that James Madison lost to Appalachian State on Saturday. I was like, well, I can't have them as a 10 seed anymore, and dropped them down. So just moved up Northwestern. But yeah, I agree. They're kind of tough to put. Like you said, they have those really good wins. You want to, a win over Purdue, whether it was, in Evanston or in, where did Purdue even play? Terre Haute?
West Lafayette.
Oh, Lafayette. Oh my gosh. My geography. I'm not here for my geography skills. But yeah, no matter what, you beat Purdue, that's a great win. That's like, if they were already an 11 seed, that would bump them up to like a 6 or a 7. So that's a huge win. And I think they're right in that 10-11 range, but I could see them going anyway. But I agree, they do have to be in right now. It's just a matter of how high you have them. Michigan State does not have to be in right now. I'm sick of hearing about Michigan State being in the bracket. 9-8, well, 10-8 because they beat Rutgers today. No, that made them 10-7. I wrote this down wrong. So they're 10-7 now, but 70th in the resume metrics, like I said earlier. That's an immediate disqualifying factor for me. Just 2-6 against Quad 1. Like, so many opportunities, didn't do enough, but so many people still have Michigan State in because of their net, because of their predictives, which the resume metrics are the most important ones.
I don't think they're close to the bracket at this point. I think they can. I certainly think they're good enough to move up into the bracket. But at this point, if I was on the selection committee, they wouldn't even really be a serious team under consideration. I think I'd probably list them as a team just to make sure we do a little discussion at some point. But they wouldn't be a serious candidate for me.
Yeah. If they had beaten Illinois on Thursday, like, obviously that's a complete difference maker. Like, if they flip it, if they beat Illinois and lose to Rutgers, they're probably in right now. But as is, I don't think so. Mountain West, who's the toughest for you to seed from the Mountain West?
It's got to be Utah State.
Because how high can we go on
How
them?
high can we go on them? They have one loss, a couple good wins, but also not necessarily great wins.
Yeah.
So Colorado State at home is like a decent win. I just think that they have a good collection of wins that are solid. Nothing is really standing out, so I can't get above a 5 seed. And frankly, I feel uncomfortable with them at a 5 seed.
I do too.
But
I have them there.
But I have them there because I think those those resume metrics are so strong, and they do have quality wins. They're just not the sort of quality wins you'd expect from a team on the 5 line, especially when their efficiency is not that great. So.
Yeah.
I tend to think that 4 seed is really kind of out of the question at this point, maybe permanently. They would have to do an excellent job of running through the Mountain West, I think, to get to a 4 seed. I don't think they could even be tied for the Mountain West title. I think they'd probably have to be in sole possession of first place for the Mountain West title to get a 4 seed. So I think 5 seed's probably maybe a little generous at this point. But I also just don't see teams below them that I think are worthy of being on that 5 line either. So in some ways, I think them being on the 5 line is actually less about Utah State and more about not having other teams that I can move there. If the Villanovas of the world, the Oklahomas of the world start to pile, Iowa States, these teams start to pile up some wins that BYU, that their efficiency metrics say they are going to win quality wins and get quality wins in their leagues. They might push Utah State down through no fault of Utah State's own fault.
I have Utah State at 18 overall, so top half of that 5 line, but I agree. Even with Illinois losing at home to Maryland today, I had Illinois at a 12 overall before that, and I was like, I can't drop them all the way below Utah State. So I still have Illinois at, I think, 16 or 17. To your point on the metrics, Utah State 20th in the net, 12th in resume metrics, 45th in the efficiency metrics. So, I don't know about their staying power up there, but they are the toughest to seed because 16-1, and apparently they can win with 5-point possessions on the road against UNLV. What the hell was that finish? Pac-12, what do you got? There only are a few to choose from.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Not a lot of options. Arizona maybe is a difficult one because we talked about earlier, but I think for me it has to be Oregon, and the reason why is nice quadrant splits. If you just looked at a nitty-gritty, you'd think very highly of Oregon. Then you see the teams they're beating at Washington State, difficult games to win. There's a reason There's a reason they're a quadrant 1 game. They're worth something for a reason. At the same time, these are not tournament teams they're beating, and when you have a team that hasn't put together wins against tournament teams, it really makes you question their spot on the bracket. I have Oregon as a 10 seed right now. I think, actually, I may have moved them to an 11. I did move them to an 11 now that I think about it. I have them an 11 seed, but I think 10 or 11 is probably the right spot for them. But I don't know. They're a tough team to seed.
Yeah, I have them at 42 overall. That is also my toughest team to seed, although now that Utah lost to Stanford, maybe I should have adjusted that. I don't really know what to do with the Utes now, but Oregon 0-1 against Quad 1A. I don't remember who that loss was to. 2-1 against Quad 1 overall, which were those road wins over Washington and Washington State, when that's all you've really done.
And they got blown out by Syracuse on a neutral court as well.
And they almost lost at home to Michigan. Needed at least one, I think 2 overtimes to win that game. So it's just...
Yeah, I mean, there is a serious question of, is Oregon good enough to beat tournament teams? We actually don't really know the answer to that question yet because they haven't shown it.
I think a one-bid Pac-12 is still within the realm of possibility. I mean, Colorado is gone now after that loss to Cal on Thursday. I think we both had Colorado right on the bubble heading into that game, and now for them to have lost that, they were up by 20 in the first half. 20. They blew it at home to a 5-10 Golden Bears team. Holy cow. SEC, who's the toughest for you to seed?
Ole Miss.
Yeah, I should have written.
Yeah, I think it's got, for me, the reason it has to be Ole Miss is just because they're another one-loss team. Yeah. Resume metrics are phenomenal.
Yep.
If you just looked at resume metrics, you'd think they're a 3 seed. You could argue a 2 seed based on their resume metrics.
Yeah. Who have they actually beaten?
It's crazy. The other part of that is they do have some wins that actually are pretty good.
Yeah, the home win over Memphis
is a good win. At UCF is a good win. I think both of those we've shown it's difficult to win at UCF. Kansas lost there, and BYU almost lost there.
Yeah.
Actually, Ole Miss almost lost there. So yeah, there's a theme. It's tough to win at UCF for anybody that's gone in there, and then Memphis keeps beating everybody. Ole Miss is one of their only 2 losses, despite actually a relatively tough schedule for Memphis. So I think if you look at it from that perspective, you could have them very high up the bracket.
Yep.
I actually have them on the complete opposite side. I have Ole Miss down at a 10 seed right now, and it's just because they have brutal efficiency, and I have questions about Memphis and UCF. I know they're good wins, but I think maybe they're not quite as good as they are now. I could see it. Actually, I would put it a different way. I expect both of those teams to have worse resume metrics as we go through the year than they have right now. I think it's almost the peak resume metrics for those 2 teams, and the fall is
certainly Memphis
is coming.
is almost entirely only going to pick up not great wins the rest of the way, except against Florida Atlantic. So yeah, their resume metrics will fall to some extent, just the same way back in the old RP high days. Just if you're playing in a bad league, it's going to drop over the course of the season. I actually have Ole Miss as 6th seed. I think I'm at 23 or 24 overall, and kind of splitting the difference between what you said. You could be as high as a 2, you're as low as a 10. I'm right in the middle at a 6. Toughest one for me is Kentucky. I know they need to be up there somewhere. I have Kentucky at 19 overall right now, so even below Utah State, a low 5 seed. Before Illinois lost to Maryland, Kentucky was the only team in my top 26 overall with a quad 3 or quad 4 loss. That was the home game against UNC Wilmington, which is like as in the middle on quad 3 as you can possibly get. And the only 2 teams in my top 26 that have fewer than 4 wins against the top 2 quadrants are Duke and Kentucky. And at least Duke's 3 wins were all quad 1. Kentucky only got 2 quad 1 wins. Granted, the neutral against North Carolina could not look any better than it does. I mean, that got so much better with age. But just overall, that resume is not there. But you watch them play, you feel like they're going to win the tournament. Maybe not. Maybe that's a little crazy. But if they're a 5 seed, they're going to be the 5 seed that everybody picks to at least the Sweet 16, if not the Final Four, just from what we've watched them do. But resume-wise, they're not there.
Yeah, and I think I think they are a tough seed. I actually have them on the 3 line still, hanging on to a 3 seed.
I'm fine with that. I don't know what to do with them.
And I think, in some ways it's a very basic idea, one that can't be captured on a nitty-gritty or team sheet or anything like that. But, I mean, what games do you think most college basketball fans have watched of Kentucky's this year?
North Carolina.
The
Texas A&M game on Saturday,
Texas
which was
A&M
amazing.
on Saturday.
The Champions Classic,
Champions
which they looked
Classic
really good
against
in, but
Kansas.
lost. Yeah. What am I missing?
I guess
Okay.
That's my point. The Miami game, I think, had a lot of
Yeah.
hype because Miami was very highly ranked at the time. Those are the 4 games that most people have watched of Kentucky's this year. If you are a casual college basketball fan but consider yourself a pretty diehard college basketball fan, those are the 4 games.
Yeah.
Every person in America that watched them in those 4 games thought, this team can win the national championship.
Yep.
The committee members are human beings, just like the rest of us. They watch those games, and they're thinking, yeah, Kentucky can win the national championship. So when you're in that committee room and you're having a discussion about Kentucky, you can say, guys, we can look at this all day long, but you watch them against North Carolina, in Kansas, in a tough situation at College Station, completely raucous arena. Texas A&M's playing lights out, and they still aren't going away.
Yeah.
Like, this is the Kentucky team we've all been watching. They look good even when they lose.
Yep.
It takes the other team playing fantastic to put them away. So I think there's something to be said for that when the committee is really looking at this team, they're going to say, yeah, I know what the metrics say. But do you guys really think that's a 5 seed? Because I don't.
Counterpoint, 2014 Louisville, finishing the season at number 5 in the AP poll and getting a 4 seed. 2017 Wichita State, finishing the year at 19 in the AP poll and getting a 10 seed. Sometimes just those teams you feel like are way better than they should be. I'm not bringing up the AP poll because it matters at all. It doesn't.
I do think there's.
But I'm just talking efficiency-wise, how we feel as a nation that they are. Sometimes that doesn't factor in.
I counterpoint to that.
Yes.
Counterpoint. What did Louisville in 2014 and Wichita State have in common?
Not in a Power 6 conference.
Not in a Power 6 conference. Guess who's Kentucky's been playing? Kansas and North Carolina. Like, they are playing really tough teams. They will continue to play really tough teams. If at the end of the year they're not winning basketball games, the committee's going to be like, okay, we can't put them up there because they didn't win games. But if it's close, if they're in the area, I think they're going to get a bump up the seed line because you don't think they're that bad. Like, we watch them. If they keep looking the same way they've been looking, I don't know how you, and it's really like, it's a human being thing. Do I look at Dayton, who's very accomplished, or Utah State, who's very accomplished, and think, should they really be seated above Kentucky?
Yeah.
Like, there's just that doubt that creeps into your mind.
And that's why I'm having a hard time putting them where I'm putting them. So outside those 7 conferences, who's your wild card team that's the toughest to seed right now?
We've already actually mentioned them a couple times tonight. It's Memphis,
Sure.
who looked as good as they've looked all year. They blew out Wichita State in Wichita, and Wichita State was awesome. Wichita State had the best game they played all year.
On offense.
But actually, I honestly didn't even think it was that bad at defense. Memphis was just good.
Yeah.
They played their best game. Wichita State played their best game. And Memphis just looked like an entirely different team than we've seen them recently. And
they almost lost to UTSA, which is the worst team in a not good conference. And then they go destroy Wichita State. It's just maddening. But it explains why their efficiency metrics are what they are prior to today. It's just...
I will be interested to see where their efficiency ends up leaving them in the net tomorrow. But I've still got them holding on to a 3 seed, which makes me very uncomfortable, to be frank. They've got...
Because you have them... You think they should be a 4, or you're uncomfortable?
I think they could be like a 5.
Wow. They're my bottom 2. I almost want to put them ahead of Houston.
And I think this is why they're so difficult to seed. Resume-wise, they have... Actually, it's quadrant 2 of all places that they're really dominant.
Yeah.
They're beating up on a lot of quadrant 2 teams. And because of that, they...
Now, beating
when
up,
I say beating up,
winning by 2,
winning games against quadrant 2. But to kind of our point about a lot of the other teams we've talked about, it's hard to win those games, right? Like, it's not... If you win any one particular game, maybe it's not super difficult. But if you go 5-0 against quadrant 2, that's the sort of thing 1 seeds do. Like, that's very difficult to go 5-0 against quadrant 2. So I think when you add all of it up, and they've got a couple really nice wins. They beat Clemson. They won at Texas A&M. Kentucky learned how hard it is to win at Texas A&M. I think that's why it's so difficult. They have the wins to justify a very high seed, but that efficiency profile, and not just the efficiency. It's not like they're up by 15 and then they let teams in close, and it was really they controlled the game. They didn't control the game a lot of times.
Yeah,
they're just winning nail biters throughout.
How many Javon Quinterly game winners do we need to see this season?
So I think that's what's so difficult for me with Memphis is I see the resume should justify a top 3 seed, and that's where I have them, but I feel uncomfortable about it.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're a team that one bad loss, and I'm going to drop them like a rock. Because it's the loss the committee's looking for, right? Like, are they the team that we think they are? Because we think there are some serious problems with this team. It's almost like they're just waiting for a justification to move them down.
I think it's probably the same with Dayton, right? If Dayton runs the table in the A-10, maybe they get a 1 seed. If they go 16-2 or 18-2, I don't know if it's an 18 or 20 game slate, they probably get like a 7 seed. It's just going to that will validate the opinion that Dayton is not as good as their resume metrics, even though I have them as a 3 seed right now. My wild card team, I wrote down James Madison. I'm going away from that. Gonzaga. I have Gonzaga as a 13 seed right now as my projected automatic bid from the West Coast. Most people use conference record for their projected auto bids. I think especially at this point in the season when most teams have played 2 to 6 conference games, that's a silly data point to use for a projected auto bid. I just go with efficiency metrics, predictive metrics, and still Gonzaga is tops in the West Coast Conference in that regard. But so I didn't write it down, but I have it memorized. They're 0-4, quad 1. They had that bad loss to Santa Clara. That's quad 3 the other night. And they have 5 games left of any consequence whatsoever. The 2 against St. Mary's, the 2 against San Francisco, and the road game against Kentucky. I think they need to go 13-1 if they're not going to win the West Coast Conference tournament. I think they need to go 13-1 at this point. Maybe 12-2 if one of the wins is the Kentucky game, to really have any case for an at-large bid by Selection Sunday. Where are you at on Gonzaga?
Yeah, I think St. Mary's and Gonzaga are in very similar situations.
Yeah.
They need to be absolutely dominant from here on out and hope that the committee thinks, yeah, they dropped a few, but that team was actually just really good. It just took them a while to gel.
Yeah.
I think Gonzaga has to beat Kentucky. I just don't see a path without it at this point. Mainly because if they drop one more, that's just adding on to the pile of losses. There's no... right now, it's not enough to be an at-large contender for me, but I could see some committee members saying, yeah, but they played a really tough schedule. That maybe it's just a little bit of bad luck. But no, at this point, if they don't beat Kentucky, I think it's going to be over for them. I could see a situation where maybe St. Mary's, because they've already gotten some wins like at Colorado State. Yep. If they happen to win out, maybe all the way to the West Coast Conference Final, maybe. But it just seems to me like we're staring down a one-bid West Coast Conference, barring something truly wild.
I think it'll be interesting if Gonzaga is really close in the end, how we view their early wins over UCLA and USC. When UCLA in November, we thought UCLA was pretty good at the time. They almost beat Gonzaga. They almost beat Marquette, both of those games in Maui. Those were their only losses in their first 7 games. Now they're losing by 46 to Utah and seem to hate each other. So that's a quad 4 win right now for Gonzaga. That did not feel like a quad 4 win at the time. And same with USC. I mean, I don't think they were ranked at the time, but they were certainly looking like a tournament caliber team based on what our preseason expectations were, and they're now sub 500 mess. So if it's really, really close, maybe that's when the committee's like, wow, these were supposed to be. We always hear that from the committee. What was your scheduling intention? Did you at least try? Nobody could have known that USC and UCLA were going to be this bad. Last 4 in, first 4 out. We got to wrap up. We're going long here. What do you got?
I have Wake Forest.
Okay.
Kansas State, Miami, and then the Drake Bulldogs are my first team. They're my last team to be in the field. They have a great record against Quadrant 1 and Quadrant 2. A couple of bad losses against Quadrant 3. But that Nevada neutral court win was dominant, and I think that would be a topic for the committee if they're that close.
I have Drake just out, but I love it. They're my second team out. Last 4 in, Miami, I think you said them. TCU I have still just barely in. You have TCU comfortably
I have
in,
TCU as my top 9 seed, actually.
Okay.
I think they're well into the field at this point.
Maybe they should have been our Big 12 team. That's tough to seed. they before this week, absolutely nothing on their resume. 1 home games against Oklahoma and Houston, obviously 2 great wins. Got to win on the road. That's for me. I can't elevate them any higher than this until they have at least 1 more quality win. So Miami, TCU, Kansas State, and then New Mexico is my last team in. So I have a 6-bid Mountain West right now. You already said Cincinnati's your first team out. Yep. Who else you got right on the cut line there?
I have New Mexico's right on the cut line.
Okay, so we're just opposite on Drake and New Mexico. That's fine.
I also have the Texas Longhorns, who are very... we actually got a viewer question on Twitter that I think very similar. Cincinnati and Texas are very closely linked at this point. And 1 loss for each of them, tight losses, can affect the other because now all of a sudden it doesn't look quite as good. So I think Texas is just out of the field as well. And then I still think they're kind of just hanging out in the area. Virginia Tech still has some nice wins, even though they lost that home game to Miami. They did beat Iowa State on a neutral court. They beat Boise State on a neutral court, and Boise State's looking a lot better. Yep. And they also have that home win against Clemson. So I think when you have that quality of a collection of wins, I think you have to be in the conversation.
Do you have Boise State in now?
Yes, I do, as an 11 seed.
So you have a 5-bid Mountain West with New Mexico just barely out. I have a 6-bid Mountain West. Let's do it. Last thing, we got to get our token Anthony Schneider question because he asks us every time we throw out a question.
He
said, do you guys enjoy the chaos? Does it make it harder for us or easier for us? For me, I enjoy the chaos unless it's right as I'm trying to put together a bracket, right? Like the Thursday and Friday leading up to Selection Sunday, let all hell break loose. Don't mess with me on Selection Sunday.
I would say even throughout the year, that would be my response. Give me actually like truly maximum chaos. I know most bracketologists would answer this the other way. They'd say they don't like chaos at all because it messes with their process of going through everything. It's just until we get to the bracketing part that I have a problem with. Like,
yes.
Especially if it's a top 4 seed. Because if you're a top 4 seed, every other part of the bracket is built around that, and then you start having to worry about, who goes to which region, conference pairings, all that sort of stuff. Don't change my top 4 seeds while I'm bracketing. But otherwise, it's actually not even that big of a deal if it's like a 10 seed loses, so they have to bounce down to an 11 or something. I can make that change pretty quick. It's only if the top 4 seed lines have a change, and then I have to redo everything to make it work.
The worst was, I don't remember what year it was. I think it was 8 Big 12 teams when they had that rule that unless there are 9 teams, you can't have 2 teams from the same conference within the same sub-region or whatever. So if an 8 seed Big 12 team won and had to go up to a 7 seed, it's like, oh my God, I have to shuffle so much now to make this still technically work. I'm pretty sure that's why they got rid of that rule because of the Big 12 that year.
Well, and the Big East had Cincinnati and UConn played in 2011, and the committee, it was not a rule. Like, actually, they were not supposed to play in the round of 32. But the committee was like, you know what, this is too difficult. The Big East has too many teams.
And there were, 11 Big East teams?
Yeah, and they were just like, we don't even want to deal with this any longer. Go ahead and bracket them together, and we'll create a rule in the future that allows us to do something like this, which we now have. If you only played once during the regular season, you can play in the second round, even if you're from the same conference.
Yeah, I actually have right now Houston and Texas Tech. They're the 2 seed and the 10 seed. I have them paired up just because I think I have 2 7 seeds from the Big 12, so Texas Tech can't play them. The other 7 seed is Villanova, and they played each other during the regular season, so that is the least of the evils, is a Houston-Texas Tech possible round of 32 matchup. Well, that's it for now, I think, unless you had something else to add.
No, I was just going to...
Go Chiefs. We'll see you on Thursday. Take care.